I'm walking without you. It's never been this way. I'm walking without you now. Oh, no.
Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for taking the time. And
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this.
yeah, me too. So start off with your name, your age, and just a little snippet about what your life looks like.
Okay, I think I can manage that. My name's Taylor Qualls, and I'm 29, and I live in Lee Summit, Missouri, with my wife Ashley and our 5-month-old son Edison. I'm a therapist at a residential care facility for high schoolers, and I've been doing that for about a year now.
Mm-hmm. What do you like about therapy? What led you into that?
Yeah, so I really, really love working with people. Helping, building community, that is kind of woven all in and out of my story. So both of my parents growing up were counselors, and it was pretty easy to see the positive impact that they had on the world around. I mean, it was like my dad was that person that, like, you can't go to Walmart with my dad without, like, running into 7 people he's done therapy with. So it was just really obvious the positive impact that he had on the world.
What would you put on, like, your social media profile under religious views?
Under religious views. Okay, so that is such a hard question for me to answer, because I guess I would still put Christian, but I would really like to be able to sit down and have a conversation like this first before somebody. I want to be able to define Christian first, not the other way around. I don't necessarily want someone to see the word Christian and put all of the meaning onto that of what they probably think it means.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That totally makes sense.
Okay.
What does Christian mean to you?
Yeah. So whenever I think of what it means to be a Christian, I think of Christianity as an orienting story that gives meaning in life, that is kind of this large, I guess, like meta-narrative story that about God and humanity and what life has the potential to be. Honestly, then I can hop straight into that. But, like, I guess there are a lot of things I used to think. We grew up being evangelical with the sinner's prayer and the heaven and hell and all of these kinds of ideas in a particular way. And I guess for me, being Christian means to follow Jesus and loving your neighbor, who includes enemies, who includes people who think incredibly differently than you, who look incredibly differently than you, and to actually follow the ethical teachings of Jesus, and to live in a relationship with him. I'm a really shitty mystic is probably the way. Like, I really like the idea of, like, I love the ancient mystics and all of this kind of these big ideas of restoration and redemption and humanity and kind of being one human family. But I'm still a modern person who is addicted to my phone.
Same.
Yeah.
So when somebody finds out that you're a Christian or reads that on your social media profile, what are you afraid that they're thinking about you?
Evangelical. So that, and I think a lot of people associate Christian with right-wing political views, with the most conservative kind of Christianity theologically as well. So this kind of are you in or out dualism, angry God, that sort of thing. An insider's club that God's going to burn the world, so we got to get as many people in the club to get the hell out of here kind of thing.
Sure. Tell me about the church you grew up in.
Yeah. So I grew up, I guess, with a really, really decidedly complicated relationship with church. Because I grew up in, I don't know, I guess it was like a Southern Baptist church whenever I was a kid. And then a lot of community churches, you know, the non-denominational, that sort of thing. And I had a weird relationship with the church and God from even a pretty dang young age, because whenever I was 6, I believe, I first had the idea, like, I wonder if God exists, and if he does, he must hate me, because I didn't think he exists. So, like, as this, like, 7-year-old, I remember having thought, like, life is meaningless and pointless, because God must hate me. So somewhere in there, even from a really young age, I had this relationship with the church, with God, where, like, anxiety got deeply into the whole thing, like, almost immediately. And I remember being like, man, I just love Jesus so much. Even as a little kid, like, I'd sit there in our bunk beds with my little brother when I was like 6 and he was 3, and I'd like witness to him, because I was like, if my little 3-year-old brother dies, I don't want him to go to hell. I was very afraid of hell.
Yeah.
And I had this motivating fear that existed, and I think about specifically with churches that I grew up in, because my dad was like, he officed as a therapist out of churches whenever, so like I wasn't quite like a preacher's kid, but like my dad officed out of churches, and we spent like our Sundays, as he did counseling, like running around the church and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly when this happened, but I just like this particular story. But I remember being in Awana. I don't know if you remember Awana. Yeah.
Yes.
And our leader telling the story of like the parable of the talents, right? And this, like, the money is divvied up among 3 servants, who are then, the master leaves, and one of them, like the one who got the most, he like tripled the money, that kind of thing, and comes back, and this servant who was given the least, like, he just hit it and was an unfaithful servant. And her read on that, I remember, was whenever Jesus comes back, he's going to ask you 2 questions. Did you put your faith in me? And what did you do with your talents? And that is going to determine if you go to heaven or hell. And I remember sitting there as my little, I don't know, like 8-year-old self being like, we're all like freaked out by that, right? Like, that's horrifying. And nobody, I mean, everybody else is like picking their nose and eating their goldfish, right? And I think I just, like, it sounds weird, but I think I just paid attention starting at a really young age, where, like, because there is all of, in evangelicalism, there is this side that is like, God loves you so much, and then there is this like, but watch out kind of side to all of it. And I think I just like started paying attention at a really young age. So I grew up with so much anxiety that resulted in me, like, by the time I was in, like, I don't know, junior, senior in high school, I was like leading a house church network. There were several house churches that me and some buddies led, going to International House of Prayer, leading worship and small groups at one church, and interning at another church, all at the same time.
Whew.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
So I was just like, I think this combo of, like, I did love community, I did love belonging, and then I had a tremendous amount of anxiety of, like, I'd better make sure I get all the shit done, or else who knows what's going to happen to me. And that was that weird combo of kind of this, like, I love this and I'm terrified of this kind of defined my relationship with the church and God for a lot of my life.
Was that tension like the main source of anxiety, or was it just kind of general anxiety?
I think that was actually the main source of anxiety, because I was actually later diagnosed with OCD, and I'm like medicated for it and stuff. Mm-hmm. And basically, as I did a lot of work with a therapist and stuff, kind of came to understand that the source of, like, once I resolved that tension later in life, I don't really have a lot of OCD symptoms anymore.
Wow.
I mean, I'm medicated, so that helps. But even it's very different than even whenever I didn't have that resolved and I was on medication. I really think that tension that was there from when I was like 6 really motivated and drove a lot of my actions and a lot of my personality. And again, I want to be really clear. There was the really positive side to it, and I don't think I got a lot of the like hellfire and brimstone and stuff from my parents, from the like my actual close caregivers of any sort. It was like Sunday school classes and stuff, but I think I just took it really freaking seriously.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah,
totally. Because I didn't have the experience of that being shoved down my throat. I just know that it came from somewhere, and I think it's from my own, my own obsession. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because I can't turn to any one person and be like, man, they had me convinced I was going to hell. I think I had me convinced I was going to hell, but it was from all these subtle messages from like everywhere, because I had myself immersed in the church.
Yes. So going back to 6 or 7 years old, mm-hmm. And we talked about the anxieties, like God hates you. Why? Like what put that in your head?
Yeah. So I spent a long time trying to chase that one down and figure that one out. And I don't know where that came from, because, whenever I was like 7 and I finally figured out, like, okay, I should tell someone about this, my parents were like, absolutely not. Like, they like got me in counseling and helped me, tried to help me work through it. They had me, and then they had me talk to pastors who were like, that's not true. So it's weird, because there wasn't anybody who's saying that message like explicitly to me, except maybe later in life. There were some churches that I was in later in life where I think that message was a little more explicit. Mm-hmm. But that young, I think it was just kind of, I think it is, looking back now, I think it's built into the evangelical framework, right? It's built into this fear motivation, especially back then, in the 90s. And earlier, there was a lot more, I think, explicit talk about like hell and punishment and suffering. I think there's a little more brushing that under the rug, even while still holding it now. Yeah. But I think it was just kind of there, and I picked it up in the DNA of the thing, is the best that I can tell. Mm-hmm. So I'm not gonna lie, I thought I was maybe a little too selfish to be a dad. Mm. I have been like I love my life, and I've loved my life for a long time. My wife and I have been married. Ash and I have been married for almost 9 years now. Mm-hmm. We got married really young. We were at a Southern Baptist school and all that good stuff. And it's awesome. And our life has been so good. And I was like, do I want to risk screwing that up? So Edison was some degree of a surprise. Mm-hmm. And I really, really struggled in those early days of like making sense of, honestly, getting around my own fear.
Yeah.
And I think that, I'm blown away every day by how wonderful this little guy is, and how deeply I can love someone. And I think I have been given so much. I feel like I believe it's in, read a quote. It was from an Orthodox priest or something like that. I forget who it was. But the gist was that, like, in the face of an infant, we see God and God sees us. And I think I deeply resonate with that of... honestly, it's just good, dude. It's really good. I love being a dad. And I between being a dad and now I work with kids who are really struggling, high schoolers mostly, who are really struggling, and I think it's really reinforced my idea that, like, if there is a God, one, I believe that God made the world beautiful and good. And two, that God is going to take responsibility for this and set things right. And that restoration and redemption are coming in a way that the innocence and the beauty that I see in my child right now that I know will not last will be something that he'll get to have again someday.
Heaven? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, heaven, but yes, I do mean heaven, but really probably more what I mean is this made right and restored. So I guess probably heaven isn't the word I would use. But God making all things new. God, if God, again, kind of saying, like, God taking responsibility for the creation that God has made and has made good, and working with us and working in us and working through us to restore and redeem and make things right. And I do believe, I believe still in like a physical resurrection and all of those things, but not to get lifted off somewhere else, but that everyone and everything gets made right and whole, and God is revealed to be so very deeply present with us, and that he always was and she always will be.
Beautiful.
So that's kind of where I am these days. I have those memories of being taught different Bible stories and stuff and being like, boy, this just doesn't make, like, the loving God that you present some days, and then God wiping out all the world with a flood and being just chill about that. These things don't match up. And there was always a dissonance. And for the first probably like 18, 19 years of my life, there was this assumption that something was wrong with me, that I had to adjust and change my point of view because I wasn't getting the full picture, and I was scared, I was afraid of God, and if I just could like get things right, it would be fine, because the thing that was wrong was my thinking or my feeling or something like that. And then as I got older, that got challenged as I got outside of the bubble that I was in, where it was like, well, maybe what's wrong isn't my conscience saying like these things don't add up. Maybe what's wrong is what I was given.
Did you ever get to like an atheistic point that you worked back from?
I think I got to the point where I was agnostic, probably, in a like half-assed sort of way. I remember at one point, because back in those days, I mean, Christianity had been so foundational to who I was. So I would, Ashley, my wife, was amazing because we were engaged at the time, and I would like right after we got, or no, it was while we were engaged. I mean, I would have like these panic attacks where I would like weep and like shake on the floor because I was so afraid of like, well, what if I'm wrong? What if this is wrong? What if everything that like something is horribly wrong and everything is falling apart? And she loved me through those, even though we had only been together like a year and I seemed like a crazy person. Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes you hear evangelical leaders be like, oh, deconstruction, people are like, it freaking sucked. It was not like this nice experience that I wanted to have.
Yeah.
It was probably the most painful thing I've ever, it was the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life. It was my world crumbling around me. I don't know if I remember getting to the point where I said, God, if this anxiety gets any worse, like, I'm out, I quit. And it did. And I was like, okay, I meant it. And then like, this was actually a couple years later that I experienced that after college, and I was interning at a church at the time, and the youth pastor I was interning with, I was like, hey, is it cool if I still work here if I'm agnostic? And he was like, yeah, we can work with that. And I think actually that guy, Jason, because of the graciousness of his response, I think I got to be in a space where I was allowed to just kind of be like, I don't know what I don't think I ever formally got to the point where I was like, I truly quit. And I remember saying at the time, I'm either God like has me, or I am so freaking weak because I can't just totally leave this thing behind. I think I need it too much. I remember really distinctly having that thought. I grew up with this idea that the story was, God created us in perfection and all of that, and that humanity rebelled and sinned, so God is now very angry. God is very upset, and it has to punish sin, even though God doesn't necessarily want to, maybe. It's unclear, so God turns on God's self and kills his kid, and then, right. And that ultimately each of us has a choice whether we want to follow God and go to heaven, or if not and go to hell. And that's very clearly a choice that everyone is capable of making. Obviously, that's probably a really uncharitable way of spinning the story, but I think you get it.
I get it.
And the Christian story, as I understand it now, goes something like, before anything else there was a relationship. And that relationship of a parent and a child, and the breath of God, that perfect loving relationship, and that is all that there was. And out of the overflow of that relationship that we call God, everything flows out so that God can invite us all to dance, so that God can invite us into the relationship that is God, and we can join in that relationship. And in order for God to invite us, but this is in order for us to exist and not just be some weird extension of God, God had to give us space to exist. God had to pull back and just enough so that we can exist as independent creatures and we can actually join in the divine dance. For whatever reason, we don't often. But that God has proved that there is nothing that God will not do to restore us and bring us into the dance. So God joins in the shittiness of all that it means to be human and the beauty of all that it means to be human, and binds God's self to us. And that we kill God. We murder God. And God allows it to happen because that is how far God will go to show us that we're loved. And then in that moment, sin, death, brokenness in our relationships, they find their way into the relationship that is God, as God experiences that. And God transforms that death into life over and over and over again in everything and everyone, until death is undone and even death is redeemed and everything is made new. And invites us to join in that restoration and that making all things new. The reality of the world is deeper and more mysterious and beautiful and exciting than just kind of like doing the right thing sort of thing. But there's something that the world is something that is full of wonder, and whenever we're after that wonder, we're after God, is the way that I understand it. And again, I don't believe you're any more likely to go to hell than I am, because hell is the next piece of restoration. Hell is whatever it is that we have to go through to, it's not a fire pit with a devil with a pitchfork, but whatever it is, that is part of our restoration and our redemption. And
Yeah. That feels like a good place to end.
Okay.
But I did want to say, you could easily pull off a good Post Malone costume for Halloween.
You are not the first person to tell me that. And sometimes my hair is significantly more than this, and then I'll have random strangers stop me.
Yeah.
And I've actually I had one person think I was Post Malone one time.
Yeah. I mean, barbed wire, always tired.
Yeah.
You probably have to lift a little bit to get there.
Oh yeah, I would.
But dude, thank you so much for spending time with me and sharing all that. And it's lots of great stuff to think about and a really cool perspective.
Thanks, I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll give you a hug.
Yeah. Thanks for the whiskey.
Yeah, dude.
I'm walking without you. It's never been this way. I'm walking without you.